Hello, everyone. Welcome to another one of ERASME Circular Webinars. Today, we have the pleasure to have Pinar Ozuyar. Pinar is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Economics, Administrative and Social Sciences at the University of Istiniya in Istanbul, in Turkey, where she also has the role of advisor to director on matters of sustainability. Pinar was also a deputy director for the Springer project on the Encyclopedia for the Sustainable Development Goals. And for the past 25 years, she has spearheaded a number of sustainability initiatives, both in the academic and in the private sector, predominantly in Turkey and the United Arab Emirates. We're very happy to have you here, Pinar. Thanks a lot for taking the time. And it's really valuable to have a view from outside of the EU when it comes to circular economy and the impact of the Green Deal. So the floor is yours. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for the introduction, and I'm happy to be here. The topic that we chose, in the beginning, I was thinking like, we are talking about Green Deal a lot in Turkey. But then as I was preparing this presentation, thinking from the point of view of the European countries, and of course companies, it was pretty obvious that, as we will see today, that it's actually a problem of both, not just Turkey, but also all the implications will be there for the EU countries as well. Let's see how that will happen. I had done an introduction for myself. I'm an environmental engineer, and I have a pretty good experience in business as well as academia. So I'm kind of a pre-academic. That's how I define myself. And one of the titles that I have right now is the one listed there, which is the most possibly recent one, and the one closest to my heart is the one to do with being the director of the International Sustainability Research Center at Istiniya University, which is IRCOS. If you go onto the website, you won't be able to find an English version yet, because it's just, it was officially established, a while ago, but it's going to happen. We will have a proper English website as well. It's only in Turkish right now. So my basic research interests are to do with, of course, sustainable development in general, and then going into that industrial ecology, environmental impact assessments, the LCAs, going to the numeric studies. But then I also do research as well as teach on sustainable universities, as well as the sustainable entrepreneurship, which is I would say it's becoming more and more important within the business schools. So when we start talking about the Green Deal, I'm sure you already know much more about Green Deal than I do. It's basically three priorities or objectives of the EU, saying that there will be no net emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050, which is, I would call it, pretty big objective. Economic growth decoupled from resource use, no person or no place left behind. All these three are very good goals, but when it comes to our daily lives, when it comes to research, it's a bit harder to achieve. And also it says, the EC says that, or the European Union says that 1/3 of the 1.8, almost 2 trillion euro investments from the next generation EU recovery plan and the EU 7-year budget will finance the European Green Deal. Okay, I will come back to this statement later on, but this is, already the financing has been stated within the EU and for the EU. So, of course, at the same time, there is the communication to do with the consumers, because consumers are those people who are deciding what's going to happen on the ground. So there is also the new consumer agenda on strengthening consumer resilience for sustainable recovery. And this again talks about green transition. So when you look into all these I would call them the last 2 years, maybe all the last 2 years documents from the EC, all these decisions and proposals, one can really see that, okay, Green Deal, the green transition is becoming more and more part of the program or part of the plan. So now it's actually maybe going to happen finally. Okay, with the Green Deal, and that's maybe the basis of the topic that we will be having today. There comes the carbon border adjustment mechanism. Carbon border adjustment mechanism is a part of the Green Deal, and is because of the Green Deal. Because when you set down such high targets for the EU, then of course there are many questions, but one of those questions is that what happens with all the trade with the non-EU countries? Because there's trade going on, imports and exports. And of course, we know that all countries have their own agendas, their own programs to do with the climate change and how they are going to manage their, emissions, etc. So the carbon border adjustment mechanism is there because of and it's going to be implemented because of the Green Deal, and it affects not just the non-EU countries that the EU is, trading with, but also all those companies within EU that, gets their goods from the, non-EU countries. So the idea behind the CBAM, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, is that there's a transition period. Let me show you that one. Okay, first of all, this starts with only 5 sectors, but these sectors are huge sectors. Okay, they are important sectors. Iron and steel, cement, fertilizer, aluminum, and then electricity generation. And with these 5 sectors, the new mechanism, it's already in place, Now we are living through this, everybody's preparing themselves. And by 2023, in 2 years' time, or 1.5 years' time, there will be a reporting system. This reporting system says that for any company, for any EU company that is trading, that is importing goods from non-EU companies, they need to state the GHG or report the GHG emissions for that product of the non-EU company. So it's what they are going to do is that they will have to go to the, supplier and ask them some valid, I would say, reporting. Okay, hoping that the supplier actually has an idea about the GHG emissions reporting, etc., etc. So the liability is actually on the EU company. This will go on till 2026, so that it's a period of 5 years, and it's called the transition phase. And by the end of these 5 years, at the end of the transition phase, this mechanism, there are 2 options, and not 2 options, but there are 2 other lines that people are working on right now. First, introducing other sectors, not just being limited to the 5 that I have listed down there. And then second, at the moment, this is only to do with the energy generation, and it doesn't include the non-direct emission sources. It's just the direct emission sources. So at the end of the 2026, the EU companies will start possibly going into all kinds of other sectors and not just into these 5, and then they will also have to try to understand what's happening down the supply chain, and not just that, the direct imports. So it's quite complicated, but okay, this is what I talked about. I have already written that down as well. So it's also very intricate, because when we look into the numbers, okay, this is the EU. This is the EU imports by category. You remember the 5 sectors that we were talking about? Then these are the percentage of the EU imports. Okay, it's mainly electrical, electronic equipment, mineral fuels, oils, distillation products, machinery, etc., goes on. And where do they import these from? And where is Turkey in this sense? These are the countries that the EU is importing goods from or products from. So mainly it starts with the biggest trade partner is the US. Then comes China, Switzerland, Russia, and the fifth one is Turkey. What does this mean? This means that whenever an EU company is importing from US or China or Switzerland or Turkey, Russia, Turkey, then they will have to see whether the norms of the Green Deal is being implemented for those products that are being imported by the non-EU country. So then that means they have to go in and see what the United States is doing on this matter, and then what China is doing on this matter, and if whether they can really report their emissions, or are their emissions in line with the EU guidelines. Okay, the liability is on the EU company, it's not on the non-EU company. The distribution of the liabilities is another phase and another question, and then maybe we should, come in as well. So this is in the previous slide, it was just a nice diagram, but then this is the list, the table format, and the EU exports by countries for the year 2020 is this way, goes down to Russia, Turkey, Japan, Norway, South Korea, etc. And for Turkey, it's 80 billion. This is US dollars. I'm sorry for that. It's not in euros, but we do have an understanding about the ratio anyway, the exchange rate. So let's go into Turkey. Okay, what we learned till now is that, okay, the EU companies or the carbon border adjustment doesn't only involve non-EU, is not only a problem or a concern, an issue for non-EU countries or companies, but also it's an issue for the EU companies. And the top 5 or the top 10 providers need to be really scrutinized, need to be analyzed whether they can, be in line with the Green Deal. Otherwise, Green Deal won't work. I mean, those objectives will not be achieved. So Turkey. Turkey is an interesting country. Turkey is doing the same. I mean, if you look from the Turkish point of view, or the Turkey's point of view, not Turkish point of view, as we have other nations in the country as well. Turkey exports by country. So where does Turkey sell products and goods? Okay. This is again for the year 2020 for last year. These are pretty recent, pretty, valid numbers. We export as Turkey, the top on the agenda, on the table, it's the Germany, then UK, US, Iraq, Italy, France. You can see from that list, you can see the EU countries there. For Turkey, we have to, this is, whenever we are having a meeting, we always talk about this. It's not just the EU, and that's always something that I mentioned. It's not just the EU, not just the Green Deal that we have to consider and we have to be aware of, but we also have to be aware of what UK is doing, what US is doing. Are there any, or will there be any new rules to do with Iraq? There are other countries as well that we are, especially the US one. All the US decisions to do with importers will be a problem. Not always a problem, but it will cause some kind of a problem, of course, in the end. So this is, I'll just have to minimize my, okay. This is a long table, and I'm sorry for that, but I couldn't really, I want to go over the table one by one, but just a very brief notion about Turkey. Our population right now is I think more than 85 million, because we have the illegal immigrants coming into the country as well. So the population growth is quite high still. But although the population is growing, in the past we were a young country, but now we are becoming older. Our median age is around, right now I think it's almost 30. So the country, the population is growing older. When it comes to GDP, when it comes to money, we are a rich country. We are in the top 20. But this is to do with, as you may very easily say, this is to do with the population, because once you look into GDP, you can say that, okay, Turkey is in the top 20. That means that it's among the top 20 largest economies of the globe. But then when you decide that number by the population capita, what you have is, unfortunately, much lower. We are kind of, we are not a poor country, but we are not one of the richest countries. We just come down to kind of we are, I think, right around the global average. So we are doing somehow okay. The life expectancy is becoming longer. That shows, as you know, the quality of life. But then, unfortunately, right there at the end, because it's still a growing country, what happens is that our energy consumption is growing, and also the CO2 emissions are growing. From 1990s to 2020, it's doubled. Okay. So let's just skip this one. Okay, I'm sorry for this very bad graphic, but I had it printed out, so I had to take a photo and just had to play around with it, resulting that you cannot read anything, but I'm just going to tell you. This is, now you have an idea about Turkey's situation, and the energy that we have to use is that at the moment we still are dependent on fossil fuels, and that will go on for some time. The government has plans and is already constructing 2 nuclear plants, has a plan for a 3rd one. That could be a topic of another total different seminar, you know, but nuclear is in the agenda as well. It's going to happen. But although the amount of renewable resources are increasing, it's still based on the fossil fuels, which will create, in turn, of course, more and more GHG emissions. So industry is there, it's growing, GDP is still growing, but coupling it with the GHG emissions, it's not really happening at the same time. But that doesn't mean that Turkey is doing nothing on climate change. We do have some actions or programs in place. We are a signatory of Kyoto. We are very serious on UN SDGs. We are not part of the ETS, the emissions trading system. It's not mandatory in Turkey. We are just doing whenever a company is interested, they can do voluntary emissions trading. Because of UN SDGs, there's the one on climate change, and there are these all regular reports on climate change as well. But also we have the national climate change strategy, the plan, and everything. So also a monitoring system in place. So it's not like we are not aware and doing anything. There are some systems in place, but the problem that we have as other developed and developing nations is that how much pressure do you put on industry, as well as, of course, buildings, transportation, and then how much do you pay for environmental costs? You know, that's always very hard to tackle for such countries. So we have some legislation. I mean, this is the responsibility of the government. So the government has already mentioned climate change in the National Development Plan that we have every 5 years. We have a GHG emissions legislation, which is very important, I would say, in all this Green Deal, talk. For the climate law, we don't have a climate law yet, but we have a draft one, and it's going to happen. So right now, all these parties are talking about how do we step in and how we will go through that transition. It's not very easy. So, and this is our INDC, the national intended national distribution, and we have a target, although we haven't signed Paris Agreement yet. But the Erdogan just recently said that last week or so, said that okay, we are going to sign it. So maybe they are then going to talk about or revisit this target. But as Turkey, by 2030, this is the existing target. We have a 21% reduction in GHG emissions. This is our target from the business as usual scenario. And then we have, I'm not going to go through these. These are all the policies that have been written down, that have been accepted by the government, saying that, okay, we are moving towards that direction. Okay. So, of course, setting these new policies is not just the concern of the government, but then we also have to, the industries or the business is taking their own course of action. And also as academic institutions, like my university, we have to step in and provide the know-how, because know-how is not there. Setting this nice policies, it's very important, because that becomes an awareness and understanding. But then also we have to put some, let me show them to you, some studies to do with the technology level studies, which are the new technologies for sustainable energy, energy efficiency, clean energy technologies, clean manufacturing technologies. All these different types of technologies need to be introduced. And this is where the universities or the academic institutions or groups like ERASME could and partners, of course, could just come into place. There should be a better understanding of the LCAs, because at the end of the day, GHG emissions reporting is to do with understanding LCAs, and LCAs are not, unfortunately, I think they're not really properly carried out because of the databases. The databases are not there still. They are good databases, but they should be improved. On the strategy level, we should have product-based or sector-based strategy and action plans. Turkey has to do this. Actually, all countries have to do this. And only after or with these, technology and strategy level studies, we can start talking about the dialogue between importers and exporters, between the non-EU countries, the non-EU companies, and the EU countries or companies. Because at the end of the day, we will have to have a redistribution of responsibilities and liabilities if we want to keep on doing business. And it's it's not like that an EU company will very easily say that, okay, Turkey is not taking a good step with the GHGs. Let me just switch to another country, another supplier. It's not that easy. Because if you switch, where do you go? You go to where? China? China has its own problems. Where do you go? So it's not a very big world. So we are in the same village, kind of. We are just, connected to each other. So the next question is, what do we do as, this is obvious, okay, and this is what's going to happen. The next question that I asked myself, okay, also let me talk about this as well. This is a diagram that we have prepared some time ago. But there's another point that I want to make here. It cannot only be to do with the GHGs, because when you just start talking about carbon, it's like, only those people to do with the environmental stuff That's how people understand that in my country. It's just the problem of the environmentalists. It's not the problem of the environmentalists. Unless you have a good operation strategy, good marketing strategy, good financial strategy, good HR strategy, then we can achieve a carbon efficient, sustainable business. So whenever we come together and we start talking and we think about projects, I think from this day on, we have to include more and more of the other components of any business, because without them, it's just us talking and we will just, like each other and talk to each other, but that's not enough. If you want to take this to strategy level, and go on. So what to do? I took the liberty to think about, what to do and what we can do as ERASME partners. We are science-based mainly in the group, but we have to come up to based on the science, we have to come up to the strategy level as well, and we have to start playing with, those people as well, I think. So it should be a multidisciplinary research, maybe with including other components that I just talked about, to provide science and research-based guidelines, providing information on lessons learned and dissemination of these, especially focusing on examples of industrial ecology, because examples are not there. Everybody's talking about circular economy. There are no good examples. There are just, single examples. There are no duplicable, repeatable examples out there. So we have to focus on the prominent sectors of the carbon border adjustment system. We can go to we can find out all those companies trading. We can go to them and talk to them, saying that we can do research for you that you can very easily implement into your operations. These are scientific research, it's proper research, but then it will have a strategic alignment so that you can use it for the company itself. And for all of these, we should be able to investigate into the available financing. The available financing is not just the framework projects, the horizons, but also there are other means. For example, just 2 days ago, I read about this EBRD's financing for Turkey, and it's only to do with climate change, and it's like 520 million euros. It's there, and it's going to happen, and there will be more and more, I think. If you recall, just in the beginning, I was talking about this last point, the financing of almost, 1.8 trillion euros into Green Deal. If you go and look into that, 1.8 trillion euros is pretty big. If you go and look into that, this is directly copied from the EC site, and I did not really, I'm not going to go through that, but the amount of support is there. And I believe it's already been spelled out in the budget plans. This is taken from the multi-annual financial framework, the long-term budget for 21 to 27. And the amount is there. And there are means, apart from the Green Deal program, apart from the Horizon programs, but there are other means as well that we have to go in and see, which one of these we can use for. Even the carbon border adjustment mechanism has its own financing, and we can use these for the types of projects that we can come together and start working on. This is I don't know how much, I took a lot, maybe half an hour. Okay, this is the presentation that I wanted to make to you today. I hope I didn't bore you, but this is an area I think that we can, and we should, not just we can, I think we can, but we should start really looking into more, because that type of work is where, research comes together, or research directly goes into business, which is now, I think, more important than ever. Thank you a lot for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Pinar. It was a truly interesting presentation because usually we get a lot of material in presentations that are just dealing with the EU, so European countries. So it was really good to see it from the perspective of Turkey, of a non-EU actor, and also it is something of very high relevance today because this carbon border adjustment mechanism is coming and it's something new. And actually there hasn't been so much talk and fuss about it, and we're also starting to wonder how will it actually be implemented, right?
Yeah.
And what are the challenges with that? So thank you so much for that, and I invite people to ask questions, and I see that Manuel has a question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Pinar, for this really interesting presentation, and I think that we have a lot of topics on discussion because it's really interesting. And three things attract my interest really in what you were already explaining. First of all, for the issue of legislation, how regulations are starting to be breaking down into local normatives in each country, but also in different regions along the countries. And even if in the European Union they don't have this integration among different regions, so there is this issue about how to implement policies that could afford the obtention of the objectives that were already fixed. But still, I think this legislation or normative approach is really interesting, something that we need to be aware of. But there are also two more things that you mentioned, and those are maybe more questions than comments. The first one, you were talking about this relocation on how, because we're talking here about different actors in supply chains, because import and export are part of the global supply chains. And in one example, I remember when COVID outbreak started, many discussions were around we need to relocate global supply chains because having everything coming from China, there's a risk. But at the end, except from the masks, at least in France, much of those initiatives were not really happening. And there's the issue, and here's my question, because I have the impression that this is more than just relocating, because we need to take into account the systemic or the complexity of those value chains that are embedded in different countries. And it also, I think this is linked with the question of liability in the production, because it's not only importing the goods and letting all the bad issues to be dealt by the non-developing countries. So this is my question.
Okay. I don't know. May I ask you to answer your own question?
No, I mean
I have my opinion, but it's
I have my position on that, and I think that it's I think that it's not only the relocation of supply chains, of global supply chains, is not just a question of cost efficiency, So it doesn't mean necessarily when you have better turnover in specific countries that you can relocate entire supply chains, because there is some liability issues. There are some productive networks or clusters, if you want to call it like this, that are around those global productive network. And this is linked with the circular economy also, because if we want to influence circular economy, we need to be aware of the existence of those supply chains.
And we are not, because you cannot really find data on. Just take, I don't know, just take a pen, okay? It's very hard to track down those clusters, and we don't have the information. But we just talk on this, policy level. It's good and easy, and then we do take down the targets. It's easy as well. And in between, even to be able to, I don't know, this pen doesn't have many components, I would say. Even for that, it's very hard to track down. So I think we have to, as academicians or as researchers, I think we should start, finding out data to do with these components and try to understand, once we understand the supply chain, but in detail with all the clusters, then start fixing it, start finding ways for circular economy. But we have to do this in a transparent way, and that transparency is very hard to achieve, because it comes down to the competing companies, because companies do not want to reveal their information. So that's a totally different aspect that we have to work on. Maybe we should have legal people in, discussing this, how it can be done. People working on international law should be in. And then, once we try to understand, okay, these are the supply chains, then come down to, what can be done on the circular economy level, the examples, and then those examples should be duplicated, because the circular economy examples are not being duplicated. We don't have so many of them. I mean, maybe I haven't done my research, I don't know, but till whatever research I'm doing, I cannot find, for example, sector-based or product-based circular economy guidelines. We don't have them. So those are all out there. I mean, even if we could start with these 5 sectors that I have written down for the carbon border adjustment mechanism, and start discussing, what's a typical supply chain, not even without mentioning any company names. What's a typical supply chain for the products of the sector? Even if we start writing about those and, preparing guidelines or whatever research, that would be an added benefit. Those I would say would be interesting for the companies. Recently, a company, Turkey is big on hazelnuts. Okay, we do have a lot of hazelnut production, and all these hazelnuts are being exported to EU. For example, Ferrero buys almost all the hazelnuts from Turkey. So what happens is that the Exporters Association to do with the hazelnuts, and they are, for the hazelnuts, it's like, Turkey is the major exporter in the globe. And they came to us asking about tracking the supply chain and finding wherever, the hot spots for carbon emissions. But even they are, they are like, they know that something is coming and that will be a huge liability and it will affect their business. They're not really aware, they are like, they think that some minor adjustments could be done and, everything will be very fine. It's not so. But this liability, for example, for the case of hazelnuts, it is to do with of course, the producers here, and also with the whoever is buying, whichever company is buying. And if there are additional costs, added costs because of this transition, there may be a day that will come and a bar of chocolate will be, I don't know, €5. So that's not really feasible. This is the same for, okay, I'll just name names, okay? This is the same for all these nice gadgets that we have, the iPhones and Samsungs, whatever we are using. When you go into there was a time that I said, okay, I'm going to find out the supply chain, the full supply chain. And I started tracking down. Of course, that was not a sane person's doing, but I tried it because I wanted to show the students, that it's all very complicated. It's not very easy to make all these decisions and implement them. And then I found out that, I couldn't get to the supply chain. I mean, I just got to maybe the first couple of steps. And then even in those steps, I found out that some of the providers are the same. Most of them are from China and they are the same, for Samsung and iPhone and whatever, it's out there. So this should be, I think, thoroughly investigated. I find it very interesting. We cannot do it on a product level, but we can not product level, meaning we cannot name names again, unless the company asks us to do that for them as the consultancy. But without that, as a research, we can very easily just go into I don't know, any of these, for example, the cement sector, and talk about that. That's relatively easier maybe to deal with. I don't know, it's just, I went beyond your question, I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Pinar.
Thank you. I think Arnaud also has a question.
Yes, it's almost the same question of Manuel, but like you said, Pinar, when you check the export of waste from Europe, today Turkey, it's a great country who receives this waste. And when you check the amount, I think it's like I think it's 30 or 31,000 tons a year. And if you check the different components of the waste, the metals, the ferrous are really important, like 10 million. And most of the 10 million go to Turkey. And I was wondering how it changed your supply chain, and are you able to use this value to go and create new market or go to a new country? And what you're doing with this waste and how you try to close the loops from the waste in Turkey?
Well, it is a huge problem. I mean, okay. It's an issue that we are still tackling. Waste, if I didn't misunderstand your question, we are not, I think Turkey is still trying to develop new means, new ways to tackle with it, and we are not really using it. We're not really getting any value from it. Did I misunderstand your question?
No, because I was wondering, I think if I remember the number, it's like we export waste about 11,000 tons to Turkey, and most of the waste are ferrous and metals. Almost the same. I would be like 70% or. So I was wondering how the exportation of waste from Europe creates this value in your chain at one moment, and what you do with this kind of waste.
We are not doing much with it. With the hazardous waste, for example, when you look into the capacity of the hazardous waste treatment plants and the amount of waste both generated in Turkey as well as those that we are importing, it doesn't add up. Okay, that means that there is a huge amount that's still there, and the amount of, when I say capacity, all these private and also public plants that are dealing with the waste. In the past, there have been, actually I worked for one of them, for them to come into the market. I did write a report for them. There was a case, there were some cases, not just one case, but for these big companies wanting to come into Turkey and to work on the waste management system, especially the hazardous waste, because as you say, the hazardous waste has, and also the non-hazardous waste, they have some very valuable components in. It's not happening. So it's basically right now, the capacities, and whenever an EU company is exporting the waste, they're not asking to the Turkish company what they are doing with the waste, because they don't care. But actually, at the end of the pipeline, nothing much is being done. Okay, the management, the treatment facilities capacity is not the same as, and it's much lower than the waste being generated or waste coming in. So there is a discrepancy there, and hopefully in time it's going to be much better. If you look into the legislation, we have the legislation to do with it. But unfortunately, we do not have the implementation of that legislation. The environment legislation is dated back in 1983. So we have the legislation, but even with water, for example, forget about waste. Waste is a huge issue that we are still, most of the waste is being diverted to landfills, and the other type of valuable waste is, there is not, facilities are much less than we need. So it will keep on being a problem, I think. Of course, whenever there is a problem, I know that there is an opportunity. So there is the opportunity to do, to work on that type of waste. It is possible, but the problem there is that who wants to pay the money for that? At the moment, nobody. It's not, somehow it's not really very attractive for the business owners to pay that, to make that investment to turn the waste into goods again, the circular economy.
No, because, I was thinking, because if you think about circularity, it means if you have exportation of waste from Europe to Turkey, and you make the connection with exportation of steel from Turkey to Europe. I just remember what's happened last year when we discovered that we import so much steel from Turkey, and people wanted to have a tax on this exportation. So I was wondering, at one moment you decide to send waste to a country and not accepting, that this country use the steel waste to produce steel and to export the steel to Europe. And I was wondering, what is the connection today between the waste that you just bring from Europe and the exportation of steel that you send to Europe?
I don't just think that they are really doing that in Turkey. Maybe just one or two, minor efforts there maybe. But I think mostly nobody has understood about that loop. You could do that very easily, as you say, but maybe it's not that easy. So I don't think that it's really happening. We are not really turning it on. I would frankly, the thing is, I do not know what's happening on the ground, but I think most of it is, most of the steel that you are importing is really actually, being produced, and just a minor fraction maybe is just recycled, kind of, in the circular economy. So that may be and would be a very good research area, because that's the type of a topic that will actually decrease the costs, if we can, find the circularity in that loop.
No, it was my question, because we have no data and information to say, oh, if Turkey just buy the waste or just receives the waste from the steel industry from Europe, how they use, what they're doing with the waste? Is the waste going back to the steel industry and you export your steel to Europe? So it's very hard to see the connection between the waste and the steel industry in Turkey.
They are not, they are just storing it, I'm sure. But one could do the research about this. That would be a very interesting research topic.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much for a really good discussion here. A lot of interesting questions. Is there anything else you would like to ask Arno or Manuel?
No.
Well,
no, yeah, just to thank again to Pinar for
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pinar.